You know that sound? That's the sound of Season 8, Faith in the Fresh Vibe podcast. I'm your host, Rohadi. Welcome. Come along for the ride. Another season. It's taken a while, 6 months. But once again, I have sought out voices on the margins of Christianity. I don't know if all of them would claim, all the guests would claim Christianity anymore. This is a podcast that invites you along a journey, multiple pathways to figure out what it means to live out the Christian faith in a modern world. We are deconstructing, we are decolonizing by capturing some new ideas from voices hopefully you haven't heard, and some you have. In the season, we will include a couple of thematic episodes as well, so watch out for those. This episode features Camille Hernandez, theopoet, public educator, abolitionist, mom, wife, and author of a forthcoming book called The Hero and the Whore. Yes, a book on the Bible's victims of sexual exploitation. Can't wait to get my hands on a copy. Without further ado, let's not wait. Let's jump in and meet Camille. The first question that I ask all guests is to share the lands on which you are situated right now.
I am in the unceded territory of the Gabrielino tribe, which is also known as Orange County, but the Gabrielino people reach out from what is now Orange County and Los Angeles. They also go by the name the Tongva tribe, but apparently Gabrielino is the preferred title of the tribe.
Traditional lands. We also, I think it'd be really cool to name. Who are your people?
So I come from two very different sets of people.
Yeah.
My father is Black, and my people on my father's side, as much as we know, they come from enslavement in the rural South, specifically the Mississippi Delta. So right now there's the Jackson water crisis happening in Mississippi, and it's very close to my, I guess I can call it my ancestral home, because it's my grandma's house. She passed away. My godmother lives there now. But yeah, we are the descendants of the enslaved, and I haven't really looked further into that. So yeah. That's as much as I know. But we're also Mississippi Delta people, which is a very different type of Southern, very different type of country. My dad's a very country person. He won't admit it, but he is. But yeah, he was raised, my dad's old. He's like almost 80. And he has vivid memories of being a child and picking cotton as a job that he had.
Wow. Wow.
He was born during the Jim Crow era. Yeah. He fled Mississippi because he was organizing anti-segregation marches in his area. He successfully desegregated a movie theater and a library in their town.
Yeah. Must be like the late 50s.
Yeah. Early 50s, late 50s.
Yeah.
So my grandma got word that the whites were after him, and he fled as part of the Great Migration to Detroit. So a lot of that history lives in us and lives in me.
Yeah.
And my mom, she is Filipina. So we are Batagueño, which is the indigenous tribe that she is from in the Philippines. She says way back, like we're from Batangas, is where she's from.
That's very cool.
Thank you. My great grandparents.
That's very cool.
My grandfather and from beyond were sugarcane and coconut farmers. Um, our family still has that ancestral home, that ranch of sugarcane and coconut farms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But my mom, she also had to flee because she fled the Philippines in the late 70s during martial law. Ferdinand Marcos essentially became.
Yeah.
Yep.
Didn't his nephew just come back into power?
Son, Junior.
His son.
Yeah. Bang Bang Marcos. Okay. And it's just like his dad. So yeah, I am here because I'm here in California, I should say, because of people who had to flee violence of authoritarianism. But I'm also here because of people who made a way in lands that are new to them.
Yes. I know that story. That's like so many of our stories for Black and brown folks of displacement. There's even sugarcane in my story. It's it sounds like so much of all this violence incurred onto bodies by powers and power systems have displaced us from our traditional lands.
Yeah.
And displaced for myself, at least on my dad's side, displaced from India, from the British Empire, displaced from Trinidad. My dad and I left to come to Canada. We become settlers on to a land and oh man, all the levels, hey? Oh.
Yeah.
Phew. Thanks for sharing about your people. And then your last name now, because you also have the people you bring in close and not the ones you have to have, which probably totally messes up folks around you in your life in terms of intersections. There's no Latino connection in your own body, but you would. Do you incur some of those stereotypes?
Oh, of having
this must be such a weird intersection. I shouldn't say weird, but
having a Spanish last name. I think Filipino culture is so intertwined with Spanish cultures because of colonization. But people have not assumed that I am any part Latin American. They usually, I get mistaken for being from Pacifica or Oceanica. Which I'm it's close and Filipino and Black.
It's a big ocean, though.
Yeah, it's the largest ocean. So I'm whatever. I guess I have a lot of grace for when people try to figure out my ethnicities.
Don't try, though. That should be the point.
I shut it down very nicely, very kindly.
I don't. Oh, you have so much grace.
I think it's. My kids are always around me. Right now they're not with me because they're in school. My kids are usually around me. And my kids, they have certain facial features that can tie back to their African ancestry, but they are usually, people usually ask if we're Filipino because my kids are they have less melanin than I do.
Yeah.
Their hair texture, it varies, but their hair texture isn't it's not the same as mine. So we often get mistaken or just assumed to be Filipino because I look Filipino and they look Filipino. Depending. Sometimes people can pick up that they're also Mexican. But yeah.
Don't guess.
Yeah. The hard part is that I'm tired of people assuming, right? I'm
That's why I ran out of grace. It's don't ask that.
Yeah.
You should know better.
And have you received the awkward compliment after you tell somebody? And I don't know if you tell people your ethnicities. My son's former swim teacher was you have a really pleasant face. And I was we are not returning.
I don't think people comment on male beauty in the same manner. So I haven't received that one. But yeah, I get a lot of dumbassery, or have. Like I haven't in a while. Like, but in the 80s and 90s, that was wild. Like it's like everything. Oh.
Exotic, yeah. There was someone who
Oriental.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, when someone says Oriental, I'm like,
my mom got that recently, actually.
Really?
And she's Chinese Japanese, right? So she's Asian, but yeah, old white man. And it's like, dude, I share a story in my book because like a lot of folks give old white folks a pass. They're like, they don't know better. Or they're just trying to, there's like, they've never seen foreigners before. And it's just like, no, that's racist.
Yeah,
that's right. They're being racist.
Yeah. And they get a pass, but I don't. Excuse me?
Thanks for sharing about your people. Let's talk just briefly. We don't want to like eat up all the time, but you have, because we got to get to your book and also where that book is going to take us. But before we do, you're writing a book. I don't have the full title. From Heroes to Whores. Is that it?
No, that's not the title.
Damn.
The hero and the whore.
The hero and the heroes to, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to have to edit that out. Maybe I'll keep it just so we know. Victims of sexual exploitation as a mechanism unto healing and liberation, like their stories as pointing unto and all the other pieces. That is the book. We're going to get there. But before we do, let's talk about briefly of you grew up in the church, but also moved around different traditions. Like what did that look like in terms of faith formation for you?
Yeah, it's like a mosaic. So my early childhood was being raised amongst Filipino Catholics, which is very different.
Yeah. And very typical though for Filipino folks.
Yeah. And Filipino Catholicism is like low-key animastic. And I like that.
Low key and what?
Animastic, like in Filipino culture, a ghost is not the same as a Western ghost.
Yeah.
Like a ghost is an animal visiting you. So, for example, like my friend who's Filipina, every time she sees a scarab beetle, she says it's her grandma visiting her or her ancestors. There's like lots of lizards at my place, and I have like I have a deep affection for lizards. It's a new thing that's happened.
Yeah.
And
we'll roll with it.
Yeah, I roll with it. But like I would say like, oh yeah, lizards are like my ancestors visiting me. It's a part of how Filipinos have taken Catholicism into different ways, but still kept our original indigenous beliefs alive in some small ways.
Yeah.
And then in my end of high school years, I was in a white evangelical youth group, left to go to college in Northern California, which is when I was in a more conservative Black Baptist church. And then I returned back home and returned back to that white evangelical church and was there for about a decade. And I left a couple years ago. And now I think this is really funny. I am a reluctant preacher. Sometimes I preach, a lot of times I say no, at a church for second generation Asian and Latinx immigrants.
So you would say that your communities that are drawing you and aspects that are appealing, especially if it's an immigrant community, is that it's more poised unto work of justice, for care for the community, especially around, matters of immigration, like that kind of activity?
Yeah. The church started in a community center that was in a historically brown neighborhood. And it didn't start from that organization, but it started like adjacent to the organization. So at the heart of the community is that like what is the Christian experience for second generation folks, immigrants? which my husband and I both identify as. So it's interesting. But I'm not like a churchy person. I'm not someone who's like, this is my church community. I hate the term church family. Um,
Yeah.
I'm still in my process of healing from a lot of wounds in that. So I would much rather identify as a facilitator who like occasionally preaches.
So where does it come into play where you have developed this voice and expertise to produce even the idea, the notion behind your book, The Hero and the Whore, what the Bible's victims of sexual exploitation can teach us about healing and liberation?
My own complex PTSD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a great launching point now. I mean, a part of that is true, but
Yeah.
from the years of 2016 to 2021, last year, my husband and I, our whole family served as like local missionaries from an evangelical organization. And the organization was really big on trauma informed care, lots of trainings with people who had learned from um, like the experts in trauma informed care and um, how to have trauma informed relationships, creating trauma informed space and environment. So that was just like 5 years of intensively living in it and having this knowledge, but also realizing that like my knowledge is incomplete. So continuing to study and like learn more about um, just the different facets of how trauma is realized, and how it moves through us in our bodies and our relationships and all that. And I wanted to write specifically on sexual violence because Christians like suck in general. But there's no praxis or ethos surrounding sexual violence. Instead in Christianity, instead of talking about or acknowledging or even trying to figure out what is sexual violence, there's that like band-aid of righteousness that people put over it of like, oh, just forgive the person, or like, oh, just do this. God wanted this to happen so that you can help other people walk through it, right? Instead of having instead of having like an empathetic or compassionate center, to say like, to tell someone, hey, this was violent and you were violated and this wasn't allowed. But also we push forgiveness too much. And like I totally like I get the theology. I get that like as Christians, like forgiveness is like our thing, right? It's like our Super Bowl, whatever you want to call it. Hockey cup? Like I don't know.
The hockey. So a hockey cup is actually cup? Yeah, the hockey cup is what you use to protect your groin.
Oh, that too.
It's the Stanley Cup. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
No, I want to go with hockey cup.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. I have jokes about hockey cups, but anyway, that's another podcast.
Oh man.
That's good.
But yeah, I'm somewhat embarrassed, but also very entertained.
That's not embarrassing at all. That's hilarious.
As Christians, we just don't have a praxis of safety.
Yeah, there's nothing around a sense of formation around sexuality, healthy sexuality.
Yeah,
nothing.
And with no formation around healthy sexuality, there's no formation of what is violent.
Especially coming out of violent traditions.
Yeah.
Whew.
100%. So it's a book that seeks to educate without having an air of like of arrogance. It's my own way of saying like these are the theologies that I've learned as I've healed from my own PTSD. And this is what I found to be super problematic. And I don't like to use the word grooming because I feel like it's just become a buzzword. But this is how these environments allow violence to happen. And I personally, I do love Jesus, and all my life I've been in pursuit of Jesus, but I'm okay if the church burns down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is to say, unless the church wants to change, then the church is just going to continue being the nurturer of these violent spaces. Because every sexual ethic that the church has, that Christianity has, regarding sexuality is violent. So
is the church, in fact, that is bringing the harm.
Yeah.
It is the source of that.
Yeah. And it feels like total shit. Like, it just feels awful to know, like, I'm so dedicated to Jesus, and yet, like,
yeah,
I also recognize that, like, as a community organizer, as a facilitator, this thing that I'm dedicated to has caused centuries and generations worth of.
It is the problem.
It is the I love Jesus, and loving Jesus is also the problem at the same time.
Oh, that's different. That's different, and also a great T-shirt. But like, that's deep. That's another book. That's your second book.
Yeah, let me finish the first one. I keep on, as a way of procrastinating from my current book, I'm like, let me just write down all the other books I'll write after this.
I want to know why the Bible's victims of sexual exploitation, that within their stories there is a pathway unto healing and liberation for us.
I think depending on your identity, you can look at the stories in the Bible, and see yourself, but we've been taught to not see ourselves. And we've been taught to look at scripture like a rich white man who has taken all of his wealth from generational violence done unto our own people. And so I am continually learning to look at scripture from my own lens and asking myself, is this even worth it? Like, does following these stories worth it? Because they're not easy. I don't believe that the Bible is a set of victorious fairy tales. I think the Bible is the set of cautionary tales that tell us how we should not be and who we should not become.
That's good.
Thanks. But so let's use an example.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Hagar. Right. And Hagar was enslaved to Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was Hagar's trafficker, who sexually exploited Hagar to have a child. So she had used her enslaved woman to sleep with her husband, in order to have a baby. But what we don't think about was that Abraham had trafficked Sarah also to the Pharaoh. And there is this dynamic, this double dynamic that we're looking at of Sarah. There's a time when she calls out Abraham after he had trafficked her, but she doesn't change. She does the same exact thing that he does for her own gain. And as someone who studied trauma and violence and then community organizing, I know that in the world of pimps and human traffickers, we call it the bottom bitch. The bottom bitch is the person who doesn't have to do anything. I'm sorry. The bottom bitch is the person who does everything, I should say, who does everything for the pimp, so the pimp doesn't have to do anything himself. He can run his business and she'll keep it managed. And that's the story of Hagar. Hagar is enslaved by this violent woman who is Abraham's bottom bitch. So what does our faith look like in light of that. Hagar runs away not just once, but twice. The first time she runs away, she meets with God. She's the first she's the first person to give God a name, God who sees me. But God tells her to return. So what does it mean to us that God tells this victim to return to her traffickers? And then...
Wait, what does it?
What does... I can't tell you because you gotta buy the book.
Okay.
But yeah, like what
you got me.
Yeah. What does that mean to us? And then the second time Hagar runs away, she has her child. So the first time she runs away, I believe she's pregnant. It's been so long since I read the chapter. But the second time she runs away, she has her child. Her child's significantly older. So what does it mean to flee with children? And that's another big thing is that like I'm a mom of 3 kids under 7 years old. So I can't not write their stories and not talk about like what does it mean to experience sexual violence and then also carry the next generation. How does that work? Because Hagar is like Eve is a mother, Hagar is a mother, Rahab is a mother, Gomer is her mother, Bathsheba is a mother. Like motherhood is also a part of the stories of sexual violence. So we have to also look at how does their actions impact their children, and then how do their children carry their trauma later on.
Yeah. Deep exhale. No, like we can't just, but we will jump right into the next thing. Like we gotta pause and linger and breathe.
Yeah.
So much of what you have just shared is vast majority of listeners have never heard before. And I chalk that up to the vast majority of listeners and for us who have been shaped and formed in Christianity in the West haven't heard from Black and brown voices and Black and brown women coming with interpretation, with hermeneutic, with stories through their lens from the Bible, which I believe is an exercise in decolonizing scripture unto as you list, healing and liberation, like ultimate healing and liberation and wholeness. When you write, and as you've been writing, is that part of your thought process? Like just me showing up, like is an exercise, which it is, by the way, in decolonizing this broke ass white supremacist or Christian supremacist perspective of Christianity and faith?
I think, yes, that's true. The just me showing up. But it's also having the bravery to let go of what I've learned. And that's almost physically painful for me. Like I have a writing calendar, so I spend 3 weeks on each chapter. Took me 5.5 weeks to write the Bathsheba chapter because that one, it was like literally so physically painful to write her story because I'm talking about rape. And these other stories, like rape is like, it's just so commonly written through this, but Bathsheba's chapter, like I cried multiple times. I ate hella chocolate. Like it was so physically painful. So to even show up to my laptop was hard.
Yeah.
And there would be days that I would just look at my laptop and be like, can't do it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
No. And a big part of that was, I have a colleague who is a domestic violence survivor, community organizer. So she organizes these communities of people who are in or have survived domestic violence relationships. And she has taught me that the truth teller carries the hardest burden. Because when you tell the truth, you're inviting violence into yourself from those who either don't believe or those who are very, very loyal to the system of violence. And so there is truth in showing up.
Yeah.
But there's also the reality that like it's physically painful to speak out against these things. And I think about, I mean, I'm just now coming back to myself because I finished writing the Bathsheba chapter last week. But yeah, it's like people don't talk about how showing up is actually painful. We don't do this because it's fun, right? As you know, like
you getting paid? Wow.
Like,
not enough.
Christian work, right?
Like, no, I'm paying to write, and it hurts. Yeah. I mean, I don't get it in the same way that you have just shared. Like it's has paused my breath a few times as you're sharing of the depth of cost that it takes to be the prophet on the forefront.
Yeah. I laugh because I don't want someone to call me a prophet or prophetic. I don't like that.
Well, I speak in the prophet as one of the gifts, which is what you're describing.
Yeah.
And you are a prophet in terms of you are truth telling God's reality into the present, into the contemporary. That's a prophet. Like, like what else? What else? But I don't incur the same, not remotely as a man, the same wrath or cost that you do.
Have you heard of the term gender mapping?
I have.
So gender mapping is what non-cisgender males, it's like an internalized system that non-cisgender males have, where we're scoping not the path of efficiency, but the path of less violence in where we're going. So an example is my husband and I were going to a bowling alley and I was driving and I chose a really specific parking lot. And he was like, parking spot. And he was like, well, why didn't you park there? Because it's easier to get to the door there. And I had to explain like, no, there's no light there. And I have to park where there is light. So I have more capacity to see my surroundings and know where I'm going. And my husband didn't know that. He was like, oh. And we talk about it from time to time. It's like an ongoing conversation, an ongoing thing that he's learning. But I use this example because, yeah, of course you wouldn't know what, you wouldn't understand like the somatic of writing this in this process that I'm having. And that doesn't make you lesser. It just means that we have different lenses, right? I'm literally going into one of the most violent religions and tell that one of the most violent religions, so incredibly ignorant about itself.
Yeah.
And telling it that these are all the ways that it has done harm and justified harm.
Yeah.
And I still believe in redemption. But the problem is that what we both know of Christianity is that the minute you speak out against one thing, they won't listen to the rest. They'll just hold on to that one thing. And then there's the character assassination, there's the threats, there's the violence and all this stuff. So, I write it's like I'm writing past my fear, but the fear is still in my body. And that's a part of what physically hurts about this.
Yeah. To show up is a triumph every time.
Yeah.
And a triumph unto the possibilities of liberation. Yeah. Not merely for yourself, but for all those who are going to pick it up. Like you unlock so much potential of liberation through this, well, I'll add costly work.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so inspired right now, but also shake my head as we contemplate the cost that is incurred onto your body. Like, you think it's worth it?
Do I think? I'll find out.
Yeah, we don't know yet.
But I had to do this. Not in a like God called me and I had to do this, but I feel like this was the last way that I could love this religion. was to go into
to truth tell.
Yeah, to tell the truth and to go into these stories and really wrestle with them. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to still be so incredibly in love with the personhood of Christ and look at all of these places of destruction and say, say, I hate that this happened, and yet there's still a part of me that wants to cling to you. And also question, like, am I gaslighting myself?
I get that.
Is this religion or is this
maybe I'm the baddie here? Yeah, I got it all wrong.
Like, am I the bad guy? You know? And so it's the last way that I could love Christianity.
A love letter to Christianity. You dare poke the bear. You dare poke the power.
Seriously, I was talking to a friend about this when I was early on in my writing stage, and she said, just asking, like, how's writing going? And I was telling her, like, I'm scared, right? Yeah. I'm scared of how I'm writing this. I'm scared of how it's going to be received. And she said, yeah, but this is your love letter to Jesus. And of course, people are not going to receive it well, but you write this, you write this as your love letter and see what happens.
Like, you're writing to those who will receive it. Like, and that's why you write. Like, and that's worth it.
Yeah. But I have to ask, but the thing is, like, I grew up in PWIs my whole life. So I have been.
What are PWIs?
Predominantly white institutions. So I have been trained to write and to speak and to operate in this very, like, way that's acceptable to whiteness. So another part of showing up is being able to ask, like, okay, who am I writing this for? Yeah.
Did you undo that? Did you shift the way, because you're describing writing unto a particular gaze?
Yeah.
Did you switch to something else?
Yeah. But I'm constant. It's like a constant accountability.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because the gaze is so important. GAZE, but also GAYS, depending on who's listening.
Okay. I didn't think about the latter. I was always thinking about that, because the biggest thing for me as I was writing When We Belong was I have to continuously remind myself I'm not writing to the white reader.
Yeah.
It was kind of annoying that when I would be saying, like, we, or, like, generalizing terms, that I was specific and catching myself if I was picturing in my head my own formation, which is in white evangelicalism.
Yeah.
And to switch my language if I was doing that. And so, like, I don't know if I can't fully escape from both that formation and how it influences my work. But what I can do is offer intentionality of decentering that gaze, which I think I did, because I was very specific in, like, I was writing for brown and black folks and Asian folks, but that was too narrow. So I did expand it and added in the marginalized in a larger group, and which works, which could include, it includes a wider readership from a book buying perspective, but it also works from who the institution seeks to subjugate.
Yeah. It's hard. People don't talk about how hard this is.
Yeah, but you know what? It gets easier.
It does get easier.
It gets easier.
Yeah.
And then you realize, like, more and more of your people, and you write towards your people. You don't care. Like, for my ministry stuff, I don't care what anyone else within the institution has to say, because they have no say. I have little power anyways. Like, you just go about your business.
Yeah.
And stay in the unsatisfied curse that I am in.
I'm legitimately so shocked when white people are like, I love listening and learning from you, and like, because I'm like, I literally make fun of you every other day on Twitter. Like, it's like you've seen the terms that I use for whiteness, right? I have no, like, I am writing towards victims of sexual violence, but within that those victims of sexual violence, like, I'm also diving deeper into those who are experiencing intergenerational sexual violence from years of colonization.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So,
like you don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
like,
seriously. So I'm like,
it is you.
I'm like, so yes, there is. Bell Hooks writes about like the patriarchal female, how like, well, first and foremost, let's understand that patriarchy is not a gender-based system. It's a system of power. So a female can be patriarchal, a trans person can be patriarchal. But yeah, she writes about the patriarchal female, who is a female who usually calls herself a feminist and believes in women's rights, but will still give into that system of power instead of dismantling it. And so I, like, when we talk about like writing towards our audience, there are times that it's like I have to like make clear differentiations and say, like, you have probably experienced this type of hurt, and I recognize and I honor your healing, and I'm here to sit with you empathetically. But if you are still pursuing that system of power, and upholding a system of power that keeps other people marginalized under you, then I'm not writing for you. You know, I'm trying earnestly to not ascribe to that. I've done it before. It's not satisfying, you know?
Let's wrap with pictures of the future, pictures of what the future hope looks like, maybe glimpsing pictures of hopefully what your kids can meander through when it comes to safe and life-giving community. What does, and perhaps you have pieces of it now, liberative community, church community look like?
You know, I'm still trying to find that out.
Yeah.
I think that,
I get that.
Yeah.
That's an honest answer. That's like, yeah.
Yeah. I think I base a lot of my writing on abolition. And what people like, I've already said that community organizing is not easy. It doesn't feel good. Abolition like hurts more because you're constantly sitting in the place of recognizing harm and truth telling. And there's different like modalities of justice, right? There's like healing justice, restorative justice, abolition. They're all important. They're all necessary. But abolition centers the naming of harm, and engaging in conflict in a really healthy way. But healthy is not the same. It's not equitable to feel good, right? It's not the same thing. When it comes to a liberated church, it has to be a church that names harm and is able to navigate through it. Not navigate through it as if you're playing like a board game. Like, this isn't Candyland, you know? But navigating through it, knowing that harm is constant and it's going to happen, but we have to name these things and hold people accountable. Whether that accountability happens within the community or that accountability happens by excommunicating someone from the community for the levels of harm that they've done, but also seeking for that person to be in a different healing community that will continue on their accountability journey. The church that is liberated has to be the church that's willing to do that versus the church that will just like just pass over.
Or you'll name the harm in temporary spurts. So it's not Candyland, it's 6-week video course on reconciliation.
Yeah.
That's our version of Candy Land.
Yeah, that's like
made it,
done it. But yeah, it's like the hurt that you experience should not be the catalyst for a program. And
that's a good word.
Right?
There's the word. Tweet that. Write that down before we lose it. Oh, we recorded it.
But I speak on that as like interpersonally and institutionally, right? Like this morning I tweeted about life coaches, that there's a lot of spiritual abuse life coaches. There's a seminary that is somewhat close to me in Southern California, and they created a program based off of student protests. Students were protesting the marginalization of identity. So they listened to the students, and instead of creating institutional changes within their infrastructure, they created a new program, a master's degree in this, right? Trying to be
I'll take your money, suckers.
Exactly. And we have to recognize that liberation is not a new program. It's like ongoing relational conflict. But when it comes to trauma, hurt, and harm, I didn't talk about this before, but we have different ways that we attach to people relationally. There's secure attachment, and then there's the different modalities of insecure attachment. But our attachment attachment styles are based off of how we've experienced fear in our lifetime growing up.
Yeah. Wow.
And so in the church, I've come from many churches that can't, like the white evangelical church that I went to could not handle conflict. They just shut people out. If someone spoke up, they shut you out. The way that we grow and we heal and we have deeper, meaningful relationships, it happens through how we engage in conflict in a manner that is restorative and edifying.
Your modalities on how we experience fear and the relational connections has a direct impact on the manner that we pursue tangible reconciliation. It would never come in a set 6-week course or whatever it might be. It's not a one size fits all, but it actually, the way that you've described all those different modalities must apply then on the other end as you seek restoration and reconciliation, the repair of those things, the repair of unto right relationship will come in many different shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. Oh man, that's your third book. That's deep. That's deep.
Can someone come here and just give me a contract for a multiple book deal?
You would make hundreds of dollars.
Hundreds, not hundreds
on the book deal. But those are books that folks are, dang, that's so good. I might take that. I won't, because then I'd have to learn about all these things and maybe dig deep in my own soul. And I'm a grown-ass man. We don't talk about our feelings. That's not healthy. Don't do that. Don't do that. You should go to therapy like a grown-ass adult. Mm-hmm. This has been exceptional. I am just jazzed. I don't know what else. That's the first word that came to my mind. Sorry. Is that what the kids are saying these days?
They're not.
Your book and what you're bringing? They're not? Dang. Not. I've been growing out my hair too because I thought that's what the kids were doing too. Jeez. I got to leave my house. The Hero and the Whore, coming 2023 sometime. Fall 2023?
Fall.
When's it? Fall. Okay. I am very excited as you, just knowing also the details of how you've shaped and formed the content to this book. Whew. Chills. Before we go, where can folks find you on the interwebs? What should we be signing up for?
So on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, my handle is at Hello Camille H. So whatever that @ sign is, Hello Camille H. And then I have a Substack.
Yep.
Where I occasionally share poetry and essays.
Yeah. So, Thick Theo.
Thick Theo Poetic is the title of it. The website is camillehernandez.substack.com. And that's the place to go to access my writings. And yeah, that's it.